And we are live here to chat about WandaVision theories and Batwoman and The Bachelor and all the things that we watched this week. But first, before we get into any of that, Kate, we had something happen this week that you and I have been talking about for at least 2 months, at least. And that was the casting of Kate Bridgerton or Kate Sheffield, or what turned out to actually now be Kate Sharma. So, Kate, without further ado, I would love for you to give me your thoughts on the casting of a one Miss Kate Sharma.
I haven't actually seen the actress in anything, so I don't know her acting skills or anything like that. I think she looks beautiful, and it was a very different take on what I had been imagining, but I'm very willing to let it happen. I'm willing to see how it goes. I will say she has a very mature face. She doesn't look old, but she looks extremely mature, and that's very different than what we were saying we wanted. We wanted somebody that could act mature but look very young. So that's different than what we were wanting, but I am willing to see how it goes.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Like, I'm excited for the season regardless. I talk a lot about like casting, and I'll act like I put a lot of weight on it, and I do. Like, I am a very opinionated person, so I develop strong opinions about it. But I also understand that, like, with a show such as Bridgerton, it's not riding on any one cast member ever. Like, you're gonna have your standout stars, but really the magic behind this show is the fact that Shonda transformed it. It is the ties to the romance genre and the fact that it honors the romance genre, all of that. So the casting of this would never make or break the show. And I'm just excited to see who it was. Um, I'm definitely with you on, I think this is a critical character aspect of her in the book was the fact that she in the book is 20 years old and acts like a spinster but is actually quite young, and that is reflective of the time period. It's this interesting juxtaposition to read about that in modern age, and I just found that very, very interesting. And it also would right out the gate in season 2 get into the whole like social issue of them basically trying to peddle women off for marriage so young, most notably her younger sister, but even her, she is young and already sees herself as a spinster. And in the book version, I think that that's like a critical social commentary piece. I don't expect that they'll take that as like a critical piece of her character in this. They will go a different direction with that, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But I don't imagine it would be like, oh, she looks so young to be considering herself a spinster, because the actress that they cast, I believe she's like 26 or something like that, like somewhere in the second half of her 20s, and she looks it, like she could play somewhere in anywhere between the ages of like late 20s to early 30s. I have repeatedly said that I think women are hottest when they're 40, so it's not at all like me saying that that she's like not attractive or anything. She's gorgeous, like drop dead gorgeous, which Kate is not even supposed to be gorgeous, so that's not even a necessary prerequisite, but she is. I have not watched Sex Education, so I don't know anything about that, but I do know that the character she plays on Sex Education is supposed to be like, I believe I saw her described, and this is not how I like to describe women, but I believe the character she plays in Sex Education is described as like the bitchy popular girl. So, what that tells me, as somebody who tends to like the bitchy characters, is that she is somebody who can play a character with a backbone, which is a prerequisite to Kate, or is a prerequisite to the book Kate. I realized, by the way, as we're talking about this, I didn't put any pictures of her on screen. Let me tell you something, real life Kate. My struggle, I have been sitting here since like we are now live at 8 Eastern, and I think we got started a couple minutes late. I was sitting here trying to find a picture of her that I could put on screen, and I have some here. But my struggle is, so when they gave out the casting announcement, I went and I pulled a couple Instagram photos and like tweeted them. But for stuff like this, when we're talking about casting, I tend to pull from Getty images or some sort of like professional headshot. And the reason for that is I don't really like showing people's Instagram photos all over the place, you know, like outside of just like social media, which is where they originated from. Like something in me feels weird, like taking something from one platform, social media, and putting it like on a live stream or vice versa. And I also don't like showing when there's a casting announcement. I don't like showing somebody's pictures of them playing a different character. So I didn't want to pull pictures of her from like Sex Education or whatever because she's playing a different character. So I was like, okay, Getty images, that'll be great. Let me tell you, there's no Getty images of this girl. Let me show you the limited content I had to work with. Here is one Getty image of her, and she's the individual in the front. Here's another, like gorgeous, like clearly a lovely girl going to a party, whatever. But like this isn't giving me like any headshot information. And then I thought there was here's what I didn't want to show, which is her playing a different character, which again, lovely girl, but she is playing a specific character on a different show and is styled for that. So I ended up going with, well, I loaded all of these, but what I would, I guess, use is a picture. This was like something under headshot, and I think she also had it on her Instagram. I will say though, in doing that, I realized she looks very different in all of these. She looks very different, styled for Sex
Yeah, I was
Education.
about to say this one.
No,
I was
go
just
ahead.
gonna say, I think this one she looks almost like she. This one looks very much like I'm gonna be a beach summer. Like, I'm in a beach teen movie, and I can actually like. I mean, it'd still be cast too old, but it's like at least she looks like cast too old for high school, not cast too old for 20.
Right.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with the pictures that they're pulling that is all over the internet right now.
Yes, absolutely. Like when she's like real life girl going to a party, she looks like real life hot girl going to a party. When she was on Sex Education, she's just like lit very differently. She just looks totally different. Like it's not just like hair and clothes and everything. Like she clearly has become a different character there. And then here in like hot girl headshot, she looks like hot Instagram model type of thing. So that gives me hope that what she will be able to do very well is transform herself to a like I almost said Victorian era, Regency era character and like continue her chameleon abilities there. I hope that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and I will point out now that I've seen like pictures of the guy that played Simon, for instance, and then Simon versus Simon, a lot of why they picked like they only put him in the same coat because that cut of coat made him seem much bigger than he was. And not saying like the actor is a small guy, but like it just gave him a more commanding presence, which he needed for that part. So I think the costuming and the makeup, where they might not always go for the most historically accurate, they're trying to mix historically accurate with also like conveying something about the character. So I think it might end up being okay, and she might actually end up looking close-ish to 20.
Absolutely. And if nothing else, like if they're trying to, because throughout the course of the book we don't necessarily see a transformation in how Kate is described, but we see people initially see her as like the homely person, the plain person, whatever, and then by the end, like it's not just Anthony, it's like everybody kind of sees her as like a little more beautiful. So if you're trying to find somebody who can kind of just transform their look, and it's like it's not just a matter of hair up versus hair down, but like, you know, changing her makeup a little bit, changing the lighting a little bit, and having her, you know, have a glow in this scene and not a glow in the initial scenes, whatever. I can see that who they've cast for this is somebody who has transformed her look a lot. So there's that. She's lovely. I'm sure she's talented. So excited for the
Yeah,
season
she could
regardless.
pull off the glow up arc instead of the glow up montage, is what you're saying. She can look but like more confident and beautiful at the end, not have that like cliche, we're gonna give you a makeover moment.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And if nothing
Whips
else,
off
I'm
the
just
glasses.
holding out hope. It's one of those things, yeah, yeah, fixes all things, just takes enough classes,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for season two regardless. I'm excited to see all of the characters that we already saw in season one. I'm excited to see more of, Eloise and Penelope and, their setups for the subsequent books as well. I'm excited to see what happens with Benedict or whatever his name is, the one that I think they're going to make his love story not be heterosexual, actually. Fingers crossed. Let's stay tuned to find out.
We'll see, because as of right now, I think he's bland toast.
You think he's what?
Bland toast from the books and a little bit from the show. I just really didn't care about him. I would like to be able to care about him.
Yeah. Well, here's to a good season two. I believe they're about to start filming it, and I don't know if they've announced a release date, but in my head, I'm just assuming it'll come out around Christmas again. All right. Now, what we actually
That'd be
came
my
here.
guess. Yeah.
There's a delay, so I'm going to sound like I'm interrupting Kate for this entire evening. And I'm not, guys. I'm not. I promise. Okay, so without further ado, I am turning it over to Kate to talk us through this week's episode of WandaVision, which we both watched this week.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the episode itself, it was great. It was fantastic. It moved the plot along. The acting, phenomenal. I had never, before this show, I had never seen Elizabeth Olsen in anything. Now I'm like, well, I want to see her in everything. So, I mean, it was just so well done. Theories-wise, I want to ask you, how do you feel about Pietro now?
Listen, much like how I like both a good, like, villainous anti-hero and hero, if done well, I feel the same way about guy characters. I just feel less towards guy characters because they're guys. So if he's done well, which I believe he was, I can still feel kind of positively towards him. I'm not like, okay, I'm not mad about the casting anymore, if that's what you're asking. I think that that
Mm-hmm.
was a good
But
fit, especially for the time period of Malcolm in the Middle, which I'm not familiar with because I didn't grow up with that, even though it was the 90s and I'm a 90s baby. I was, I guess, too much of a baby to really remember that. But yeah. What about you?
so I really wasn't, because if you remember, so the guy that's playing Pietro right now is Evan Peters, who actually plays Peter Maximoff. I think that's how they call him, who is Quicksilver in the X-Men movies. So there's a whole big thing about there's basically like three options, well, four metaphorical options for who this guy could be. It's Peter from X-Men, Pietro from the MCU, and it's just for some reason he's changed his face. That's very unlikely. It's probably something else. There's a lot of people thinking it's part of Wanda's uh, subconscious, and because of the trauma associated with his death, he's changed his face. Or it's a third-party character that has come in, and because they didn't know what Pietro looked like, they took an alternate reality face of Pietro and are using his face to kind of, and similarities enough of the other Pietro to trick or manipulate Wanda. That's the one I think it is. Because throughout this episode, there were several hints as to it not being, especially not being MCU Pietro. I mean, his line saying that he died in the street for nothing, that's completely inaccurate. Because I did actually end up I went back and I watched Ultron and Captain America Civil War, because there were so many things I was like, I don't know enough about what's going on behind the scenes to make a judgment. So he died as a sacrifice to save Clint. There's
Can I
no way
just
he would still post-mortem into. Yes.
Sorry, I'm interrupting. I just don't want to gloss over
Yeah.
the fact that in order to do research, you watched like extremely major, heartbreaking Marvel films. Like in order to do, I just feel like that's like maybe a slightly different approach than what most people do, where they might be like watching the major Marvel blockbusters and then like for some slight additional in between entertainment, they'll watch the TV shows, whereas you're like watching the major film as like a little happy diversion in between WandaVision episodes. I love that about you. Go on.
Well, I mean, we've discussed this before. Character plot over everything. I mean, character development is the top priority for me. And I had forgotten why I didn't really love the Marvel movies because I had seen like one or two before. They're not bad. It's just a lot of action and plot and a whole lot of missed character development and stuff. Because I'm watching all this trauma just in these two movies happen to Wanda. I'm like, there's so much you could talk about here, and you're just wasting it. And I mean, part of the waste now, of course, gets to be utilized in this fantastic show that we're talking about. But yeah, it is funny. I realized it as I was doing it. I was like, you're watching movies to research for a TV show. But yeah, so
I love
so
that though.
I,
Carrie in the chat says, for personal reasons, I want Petro to be the Fox X-Man version because that character was one of the best things about the Fox movies.
I would be willing to say it could be him and he's being like used in some way. I just don't think it's subconscious Wanda or original Pietro anymore because of a lot of the lines he said. It just makes absolutely no sense. And then especially, so there's that scene where they're having that whole conversation about how did she do it. You listen to that scene, he is buttering her up. He is trying to make her feel comfortable with talking about what has happened, her trauma, what she's doing. Is she manipulating the town, anything like that? And he's also like trying to alleviate some of the guilt of whoever's doing this to the audience. So it's supposed to be a scene where he's trying to get trust. And then he asks, how'd you do it? There's nothing in me that thinks that if it was real Pietro or Wanda's subconscious, he would actually need to know. He wouldn't care. He'd be more concerned about, are you okay? Why do you think why did you do this? Not how did you do this? He'd be more concerned about like what's going on in her head or her discussing and somehow processing her trauma because this is essentially her trying to process trauma. Instead, like he's cushioning the blow in an investigation. So I think it's either Quicksilver from X-Men or somebody else trying to trick Wanda into revealing how she did this. Whether he's working with Agnes, Hayward, whoever, whatever, I just don't think it's her or her brother.
I will say, if you think about the fact that we haven't necessarily established, unless I missed it, I don't know that we've established exactly how long she has been in Westview or has taken over that place. Then you'd have to imagine that there would be other entities that may have found it before Sword, right? So not just the entity, like not just whoever's after Vision's body or whatever. Like there could be multiple enemies kind of coming together, which is a pretty classic Marvel move of multiple unaligned enemies coming together, likewise multiple unaligned heroes coming together. So that's where my struggle is, where I see him as a I'll say malevolent force or manipulative force, but I don't necessarily know what's behind that force because there's so many possible enemies.
Yeah, well, and it's funny is look at like TV show structures. There's a part of it is you can look at how many episodes you have left when you're trying to figure out a puzzle to figure out, okay, how much time do they have left to explain who is with who? The thing about WandaVision is not every episode's the same length. Like we've had 30-minute episodes and 40-minute episodes. and it could actually potentially be an hour-long episode next week or however long. They're not really constrained by time. They can make it an hour-long episode if they want to, if they need to. So that's part of like, I think maybe the next three might do that. It's just a guess. I don't know. But because of that, yeah, I think they could do any number of this like ragtag team is also just happens to be kind of working on the same lines as this team unknowingly, like all that stuff. There's a lot of moving parts on the outside trying to manipulate Wanda, while we're also still trying to focus on the processing of her grief and trauma in a way that's very unique. So then you don't always know, okay, well, would this be somebody manipulating her, or is this grief manifesting in an unhealthy way? Like, how is it, like, what? Because there's no arguing that even if she's being manipulated, she does have some amount of influence on this place. And even when we find out who is doing this, there's going to be an amount of, we have to like kind of sparse out, okay, well, what was unhealthy grieving and what was her being manipulated and what was, to be honest, sometimes there is moments where she is being healthy in her grief. So I don't know. It's a really big puzzle and I'm so excited for it to be done so I can like figure out all the pieces, and I'll probably, I don't miss that.
I'm just tossing in what Carrie said in the chat, which is a really good point. He says, if someone's manipulating Wanda in all of this, to me, it's not as important to know who it is. I want to know why. That's a good point. Like, are they just trying to siphon her powers? Why are they invested in, keeping her there in particular? Like, who is benefiting from this? I'm struggling to see anybody benefiting from this. Earlier on in the season, it seemed like Wanda was kind of maybe emotional, or like she thought she was emotionally benefiting from this because she was creating sort of an idealized world. But it's kind of like a Good Place plot twist, spoilers if you haven't seen it, where what you thought was an idealized world is actually not her ideal world. It's actually full of stressors, whatever. So is she really the one benefiting from this? I mean, are her children even real? What is she getting out of this? And if she's not getting anything out of this, who is? I don't think Sword's getting anything out of this either. Like, they want to solve this, they have a stake in this, but what are they benefiting from this? Like, what are they benefiting from this current occurrence existing?
So I have two different things on that. So first, for the like it being kind of like Good Place, I've realized that, so we were trying to figure out why there was different decades of the sitcom, like why would that be? And we also talked about how there's a noticeable shift of her kind of going with it and being happy, but kind of being just in it and not really in control of it, but it being pretty stable. And now it's more like she has more power, more control. Well, not really control. She has more power, but it's more stable, it's more chaotic, and she's having to face reality on a much more regular basis. I think a lot of that has to do with how you look at like the 50s sitcoms. They were always advertising the nuclear family, like the idealized American dream, things like that. You move to like the 70s, and we start to get a little bit more about like there was more discussions on real topics in the sitcoms, but it was still kind of a happy thing. There wasn't ever too heavy of a topic. The more and more we get to like the 90s and the 2000s, those sitcoms started to adapt this very sardonic view of comedy. It was a very much more dark humor. The parents, they a lot of times were portrayed as like the idiots or like the like emotionally unavailable kind of thing, like that. It was more darker ideas. So I think what they're doing is they're kind of showing her progression of like having to face reality more. Like, she was living in this ideal family unit American dream idea, and then she's getting closer and closer to this is more what real life looks like for her. There's also more chaos in those shows. There's, because definitely with TV and stuff, they developed more moving parts and things like that as TV has progressed. And so the chaos that comes even with her increased evident power. There's more chaos, there's more uncontrollable aspects, more variables with her kids. She can't control them at all. They bring in external kids, which is adding a whole other variable of her being unable to control people. It's far more a reference to how she's processing how she interprets the illusion and how she sees her own trauma and grief and processing, and how the chaos and all these details are kind of spiraling. So
I
there's
don't have anything to
that.
add to that, but that is a really good analysis of the progression of the family sitcom and how that's reflecting Wanda's internal struggles.
Thanks. So then so the whole thought process of motive, there's of course there's different possibilities of who is behind it. Each one would have a different motive. I have a motive for Hayward. Hayward announced his motive. Hayward was around during the 5 years where everybody was gone. He has as much as he's a jerk, he has a very human response to what's going on. Very unhealthy response, probably even more unhealthy than Wanda, if we're going to really point fingers. Because he says stuff about how he has a very, very prejudiced view on the superheroes, and that's always been like at the hero shows. There's some groups of people that don't like them, that think that they're the reason that all these world-ending events happen.
Right.
And so he has decided he's going to basically eradicate superheroes. He's going to make them the villains. He's going to make people hate superheroes. So what he's doing is if he's doing this, my big theory is if he's really behind a lot of this, he obviously was going to use Vision's body to create weapons. He wanted to make some sort of weapon with Vision's body. And you can especially see that it's a very like on the nose idea. He called his like secret spying on Vision application Cataract, which is like the opposite of Vision. Oh, so funny. But so I think he's trying to use this as a way to frame her, because she is now being identified. Like you also hear Monica say that it's clear through Monica that in some way the general public knows how powerful Wanda is, how integral she was into the defeat of Thanos. So he's taking her, the currently most emotionally vulnerable, and he's taking the very undefensible body of Vision, and he's going to use them to like blackmail the idea of superheroes and make people hate them, to get rid of them, because he suffered during those 5 years, and maybe he's working with Agnes. I don't. Or,
I like the perspective, and it kind of reminds me of The Gifted, which was another Marvel, I believe, show that was on Fox, which was excellent. In which it was mutants, not necessarily like superheroes, but there was like the pro mutants and the anti mutants, and similar levels of manipulation would happen, wherein mutants would be allowed free or allowed to use their powers free as a way to like destroy public opinion of them. Also, regarding your past analysis of, you know, as the portrayal of what the ideal family
yeah.
was changed, you know, it reflected the character motivations in WandaVision. Carrie says, damn good insight on the TV analogy. And he also adds a reality TV episode of WandaVision could be special if they use that format in a new app, or like in a new, what would be so cool, because right now they followed it like a family comedy across the decades. It would be so cool if like in season 2 each episode is like a different reality show, so you could do like, you know, Survivor, Big Brother, Bachelor, you know, like that'd be so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a season 2, but that'd be cool. It would be cool to see that because my guess is the next episode's going to be Modern Family, and I also think the next episode's really when everything's going to fall apart because she's expanded the bounds. I think everything, as powerful as she is, don't get me wrong, extremely powerful. She has fully become the Scarlet Witch, the most powerful Avenger. Yeah, whatever. Um, I think there is bounds, and I think there's going to be chaos inside the boundary because I mean she absorbs them, and the first thing they turn into is a circus. It's literally going to be a circus in there, going crazy. Um, and I mean, I know you said you didn't watch the promo, but in the general promo, there's one more part that I've seen where it's very sitcom-y, and she is in her house and she can't even control the furniture. So I think it's going to fall apart next episode. It's either going to start and like that's going to be the cliffhanger, or we're going to see it just completely hit the fan and start to see the progression of figuring out really what's going on.
I have a couple questions. First of all, do we know how many episodes there's even going to be in season one?
9.
9. Okay, and we've seen 6 so far, so there's 3 more left.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they could be hour long. We don't know.
Oh, okay. Good point. So far we've done 1 decade per episode. Is that right? Like Malcolm in the Middle, I guess, was 90s. We had 80s. I don't remember what it was. Like, which show it was referencing. 70s before that, 60s, and started with 50s. Am I loosely following?
Yeah, that was roughly what it was. Yeah.
Okay. So if the next one is Modern Family, which I think it is because I have not watched the promo. However, I did see somebody tweet a GIF of Wanda, Scarlet Witch. She's like seated on a couch and she seems to be talking to a camera, like camera confessional style. And she was like, Mondays, am I right? And just the way the staging was behind her, I'm very familiar. Like I've watched every episode of Modern Family. I think this is an unpopular opinion because I think people got really tired of that show, but I love that show. I could tell it was absolutely a direct reference to Modern Family. The thing is, Modern Family, and that was what I was just Googling. Hopefully, I remembered to mute and you didn't have to hear me typing and breaking the sound barrier. Modern Family started airing at the end of 2009 and it aired until 2020. And we're talking, it started airing at the very, very end of 2009, which means it covers the decade of 2010 to 2020. So if we're already showing Modern Family in the next episode, again, like we don't know exactly what format this is. Maybe they skip decades in the middle of the episode. I don't know. But if I would have expected that the next episode would cover the 2000 to 2010s, like whatever family comedy you would consider to be forefront at that time. I don't know. Trying to think of like what would be a good example of a 2000 to 2010
so
comedy.
I kind of actually looked this up for Malcolm in the Middle because I actually thought it was, I wasn't quite sure when that was. I didn't, the only sitcom I ever really watched was Full House, ironically. So I wasn't very much in the know about when these actually could be. A lot of them are, like, I think the 50s one that they were referencing was actually like late 50s, and the same with the 60s one. The 70s one was truly the 70s. The 80s one was very, very late 80s or into the 90s. The Malcolm in the Middle was actually very, very late 90s, I believe, and then into the 2000s. So I think they're just kind of going to use that as the 90s, and then 2000. I don't think they're trying to hold necessarily into exactly decades. I think they're trying to kind of go through eras of sitcoms more, and it was just easier to refer to it as like the 50s episode because it was referring to a bunch of 50s sitcoms. I don't think they're necessarily going to buckle themselves to having to cover all the different exact decades of sitcoms just to tell the story. because they have kind of jumped around a little bit already. So I think the next one is not there is Modern Family. I could be wrong. They could have another one in there, but I just think having Modern Family be episode, because that would be episode 8. I feel like the last 2 episodes probably are going to be a lot of like kind of the big action, the tying up loose ends, everything else. I could be wrong about that, but I genuinely believe that next episode is going to be Modern Family.
I think you're right. I had I just googled this now. Apparently Malcolm in the Middle is started premiering in 2000 and ended in 2006, and Modern Family starts in, as we said, 2009 and goes through 2020. So
Okay.
that absolutely checks out with what you're saying, where it would be directly following it. It would take us to the quote unquote modern age if it ends
Yeah.
in 2020. And like you said, last 2 episodes of chaos and modern age, or maybe jumping back through time or going onto all these different sets for chaotic moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, any other WandaVision theories, particularly those having to do with what's going to happen in these last 3 episodes?
I mean, the scene with Agnes and Vision, that very similarly to the scene between Pietro and Wanda, just based on the dialogue, paying attention, that very much affirmed to me that she, if not is fully in control, is definitely not a pawn player. She is definitely influencing this in some way. I mean, she was further out of the bounds of the city than anybody else, and she had more control than the bots or whatever. And yet she was still playing it like she. I think she was pretending. Also, the on the nose costume and the witch's cackle. It's very clear to me. She's also the only person that has ever um, directly called out Wanda other than Vision, and Vision's just guessing that it's Wanda. And I mean, because even with Herb, so Herb kind of like today or this episode addressed her like, is there something you want to fix? But he did it almost like as if she was the mayor or like she was in charge of all of them as some like way their boss or something. Whereas whenever Agnes breaks that barrier, she does it very much like a fourth wall break, like an actor would speak to an actor
Mm-hmm.
instead of his was much more like a suit, like kind of like you're in charge here. He didn't break the fourth wall.
Mm-hmm.
The only other character other than Agnes that has broken the fourth wall is Billy, and because Billy has the same superpowers as Wanda.
Right.
So I think Billy, if Billy's even real, has some control or greater understanding what's going on than say Tommy.
I
So I
am.
think in the next few episodes, we're really gonna. I was just gonna say, I think in the next 2 episodes, it's really gonna start to come apart. We're really gonna get some confirmation about at least one of these 3 people that I keep speculating about. I think we're gonna see um, Wanda has become more and more suspicious, and I think she's gonna continue to question things a lot more. I also think that she's either going to have to convince Vision or Vision's going to come back and not remember all of the things he's discovered. I think he's going to have basically another mind reset. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't, whichever way, that's going to be interesting. But um, they have a lot to explore in the last 3 episodes, and I'm excited.
I just realized you mentioned he may have a mind reset. I wonder if what we're going to see in. Okay. What if. Okay, so the number one thing I always complain about with Modern Family is how frustratingly dumb they make the dad. Like the main guy, Phil, in Modern Family, he's just like the stereotypical
Mm-hmm.
like idiot dad who doesn't know what's going on, and he's such a like immature child and he just doesn't get it. And it's like such an archetype, and everybody thought it was so cute, and I literally like it drove me up the wall. I hate that character type from the bottom of my heart. Okay, so from what I saw, literally basing all of this on a GIF I saw of Wanda being like, "Case the Mondays, am I right?" And it looked like she was like in the style of Claire Dunphy. That would then make Vision Phil. Well, if they're saying like exactly what you're saying, that there's some kind of brain reset, he's clueless, he doesn't know what's going on, you know, like maybe a reset back in maturity, maybe they could play it off as like he's like a Phil Dunphy character of like being clueless, not understanding, not getting it right, but like over the top because it's WandaVision. If then after the Modern Family situation, they are actually trying to recover his memories or like build him back up, that would then cue them going back in time to the beginning, to the 50s version of this, so they can like rebuild his mind back up through the whole thing. And that would then allow them to revisit all these different sets in the final 2 episodes. That could be interesting. I don't know. Also, Carrie mentioned in the chat exactly what I was also thinking, which is I am so excited to see Darcy in the Modern Family world. I'm very curious what they're going to sort of stylize her as, if she's going to be a neighbor, if she's going to be like a Sarah Hyland or Alex Dunphy, you know, situation. I think that'll be really funny. Carrie says that she was in Two Broke Girls, which was a guilty pleasure of his.
Okay. Yeah. I did remember one other thing that I think is going to happen in the next upcoming episodes. So Monica said something about like, we can't kill Wanda when she's talking to Hayward. She says, if this is Wanda, especially if this is Wanda, the only way to stop this is Wanda. So I think they're going to have soon, they're going to have a very honest and patient conversation with between Wanda and Monica, and basically Monica explaining there's more to this and neither of us know exactly what's going on, but I think we trust each other enough to help each other fix this. And I think that's going to happen whenever Monica breaks into the place in her big tank of a car.
I'm so excited. Cannot wait for the next episode. Have been very much.
And then after that, I have like some really off the wall crazy theories, but I'm so excited.
I would love to hear the off the wall crazy theories. Let's wrap up the show with them after we go through rapid fire a couple things where we have like 60 seconds on the clock to hit a couple certain topics. The first one is, we'll say 60 seconds on the clock, but we'll split it 30-30. 30 seconds each of us to convince Carrie to watch Bridgerton, which was his initial question in the chat. He said, "Hey ladies, I've not seen Bridgerton. What's your pitch as to why I should?" Well, Carrie, I'm so glad you asked. Would you like to start, Kate, or would you like me to start?
You can start.
Okay. Thank you. 30 seconds on the clock, loosely following this. So, Bridgerton is a Shonda Rhimes show. That should get you right off the bat. It is a Shonda Rhimes show where everybody does not become terrible. Everybody does not die. The whole world is not corrupt. We are not constantly living in fear of B13. It is her and Disney and Netflix coming together to bring to life this heroic romance world that has all the best elements of a family sitcom and a Regency era drama, and it is just everything you think of when you think of a guilty pleasure, but there's nothing to feel guilty about, even though there is just like a lot of sex, like a lot of just like so much sex. Don't feel guilty about it. Great show. You'll love it. You will not regret a single second. Kate?
So I would just say it's a mildly fantastical Regency version of Gossip Girl. And the highlight of the show is the screen Julie Andrews sassing everybody, and the on screen Lady Danbury sassing everybody, and the on screen Mother Bridgerton sassing everybody, and the Queen sassing everybody until they finally just do what they're supposed to do and get married.
That's right. And there's nothing I want more than sassing people into getting married. Carrie has also thrown in the chat, by the way, since we have an Avenger gone wrong, apparently, why haven't they called yet on Mr. Reality Bending Man himself, Doctor Strange? I wonder if WandaVision could afford to get Benedict Cumberbatch on the show. Surely they can. There's COVID. What else is anybody else doing? Like, is anything else filming right now? Probably not. It shouldn't be. We probably took more than 30 seconds to pitch Bridgerton to you, but you will love Bridgerton. Please come on the show afterwards and tell us what you thought about it. Would love to hear it. You will enjoy it, guaranteed. Okay. I'm going to skip Miss Scarlet and the Duke because I haven't watched it yet this week, but it's on my radar, and I know there's only 2 more episodes. So next week, after the like one episode, I assume was released this week. I haven't yet gone on PBS to check, but I'll watch 2 episodes back to back, which will take me into the finale, and then I'll come on here and probably rage if they don't get together, which I assume they won't. I'm going to also skip the Good Doctor, but I will give them sort of like more of an asterisk apology correction note. I mentioned last week, or maybe the week before, that I was prepared to be upset with them because they seem to be doing a cheating storyline. They did not do a cheating storyline. They did do a fake out in the episode preview, but maybe what we've learned from this is that I should do as I am told and stop watching previews. I will give a big shout out and show on screen the worst, best worst, I guess, true villain. Like, we're not talking about anti-hero anything. She is terrible. She is evil. I wanted to reach through my screen and murder her. Like, I felt rage when she was on my screen. I was truly, truly angry. Is the villain from this week's Batwoman. She was a villain of the week. She's not even a whole like season long villain where they've built up my hatred to her over time. No, they whipped up hatred from me in a week. Like in 1 hour, like in 30 minutes, I felt the most like visceral rage against this character. This week's episode of Batwoman is a great, even just standalone. I was rooting for Batwoman the whole time. It was the most clear-cut good versus evil episode I've seen in a long time, and I loved it.
That sounds a lot
And
like the guy in Arrow from the prison that everybody was like, he was a much better villain than the dragon.
yes, it's exactly that. You know how sometimes like when we had Dragon or just like somebody who was like forgettable and then there'd be a villain of the week and we'd be like, God, he was wonderful. She like I don't even want to say she was wonderful because I hated her so much. And like that's the mark of a true villain. I remember
Yeah.
watching Sound of Music when I was younger, and the Baroness Stradar, the lady who played her said like, you know, in real life after playing this character, you know, people would come up to me and be like, you're such a bitch, like I hated you, and she took it as like the highest compliment. And like we're not even talking about like social villain, like this late I keep gesturing the wrong direction, this lady played like true, like it was a well written evil character, like no redemption, no charm, no motivation, no anything, you know what I mean? And she also played her like so evilly, like like props to her, but I don't even want to give her props. It was just like she got under my skin. I won't spoil anything because like truly the episode was great. Moderate shout out to Riverdale for doing their flash forward despite their bizarre timeline. I thought it was actually pretty interesting. And a quick update on Married at First Sight. This season is absolutely ridiculous. I won't even give spoilers, but of the 2 couples that you see on your screen right now, One of them has a person who they are doing their best to show as like a full on raging alcoholic. And one of them has a fully pregnant partner outside of this marriage that they have been put in. So I blame the show for both of those two things. They are editing one of these characters to look like a raging alcoholic, or they willingly put a raging alcoholic in a marriage with another person and are showing it and exploiting it on screen. So I have issues with that. I thought you were supposed to do a psych eval and all of that first to clear them. So you either missed this, or you knew it and you're showing it anyways, or you're taking a real person, not a fictional character, a real person with a real job, and editing them to make them look like a raging alcoholic, and therefore possibly putting like their whole like life and career and like social whatever like at risk. The other one, you have somebody who you know was engaged like 3 months ago, and if you like listen to him talk for more than like 2 seconds, you know that like every word that comes out of his mouth is a lie and he's a loser, and you believe him when you say he's not still sleeping with his ex, and then you're surprised when on his honeymoon his ex says she's pregnant. So I have my bones to pick with Married at First Sight because I always use them as an example of like, here's a show that, unlike The Bachelor, which has like a truly terrible track record with like relationships, like literally all of them break up, like absolutely worse than the divorce average. I will sometimes cite Married at First Sight as one that like they tend to actually keep up with the national divorce average. Like, yes, not all the couples stay together, but like a good number of the couples stay together. And they're ruining my stats by putting bad couples together. And I resent that. Because yes, I want them to be entertaining, but I'd rather shows like The Bachelor be entertaining, where like I know they're gonna break up in 2 weeks, and Married at First Sight give me some stats that like can help me defend dating shows, and they're not doing that. And we should probably skip The Bachelor for this week because it's like all up in like controversy of God knows what right now. Like I don't even know, like Chris Harrison stepping away from the show because guess people are figuring out right now for the first time ever that Chris Harrison is racist, when I feel like we knew that since like 2010. Like it's now in 2021 that you all are figuring out that a very rich, publicly Republican white man in Hollywood is racist. Like I just feel like I don't know why that's surprising right now. You guys let him stay on this show this long. Like people are acting like this is brand new information when it's not. Anyways, so I guess he's stepping aside because people figured that out in the year 2021. Great. And that's like dominating Bachelor news. So like I can sit here and talk about the fact that they went from 11 women to 4 in this week, cutting everybody that I knew that Matt was going to cut, because I knew that Matt was lying about liking confident women, and he cut literally everybody except the 4 shyest girls. So I feel so validated, but I can't even talk about that because all anybody cares about the fact that Chris Harrison is stepping down, probably temporarily, probably only for like 5 episodes from the franchise. I said I wasn't going to rant about The Bachelor, and then I did. Okay, Carrie says, help me out. Ryan's girlfriend from back in the orphanage. What are we supposed to think of her now as an adult? She was at that guy's house when Sophie and Alice showed up. Is she a villain? Oh, you said Ryan's girlfriend. Sorry. I hope she's not too much of a villain if she is a villain, because I think she has good chemistry with Ryan. Probably not the answer that we want, but maybe it's the answer we deserve. I really want to see good romance for Batwoman, but to their credit, I'm also enjoying the show without a lot of romance. And the last thing I will rant about, and then I'm turning it over to you, Kate, to take us out with your wildest WandaVision theories, your crack theories, as it were. And you can, roll us out with that. Just a quick shout out to This Is Us, which is one of my favorite shows to talk smack about, but I really enjoyed a story that they highlighted this week. They did something that I haven't seen them do a lot before, which is they had a flashback, which was not actually a flashback of any of the main characters or anybody that ties to the main characters at all. They did a flashback that they showed throughout of the lovely couple you see on screen. In between certain scenes or whatever, they'd flashback showing them meet, which is the scene that I have on the screen right now. They showed them, getting married, having their first child. And in between, we see the guy that you see on screen. He is constantly hyper focused on like trying to figure out this specific like computer thing. And by the end of the show, his wife is like, well, explain it to me. What are you trying to figure out? And he explains it to her. And basically, it is that what was the predecessor to being able to do like emailing images and sending videos. And he is the process that he discovered that they showed kind of in between things over the course of the episode during the course of the episode, you see like it's set in like current COVID times, and you see a woman, one of the main characters, giving birth. You see another woman at the birth of like her adoptive child. So it's like all set in the hospital. You see like grandparents who can't be there and husbands having to be out in the hospital, whatever. And they're all like basically like FaceTiming and sending images the whole time. And you see this guy's story in between the whole thing. And then at the end of the episode, it's revealed that this is actually he is portraying a real life character, the guy who actually invented the image transfer software that we now use for like FaceTime and stuff. And they are giving him like a little homage for the work that he did that kind of is keeping everybody connected during COVID stuff, and what's probably bringing us to anybody's screens. Okay, back to Kate.
Yep. Cool. Okay, so crazy theory time. This is crackhead Kate at the moment. Okay, so this one's not really crackhead theory. This is more of just like kind of really going really dark. What if all the people that we see, like whenever they are awakened or when we see the people kind of more in the frozen state at the edge, what if they're experiencing Wanda's pain on top of their own trauma and that's why they're crying? Okay. There you go. Thank you. Okay.
You hurt me.
Right? Yeah. It's scary in here, okay?
Your mind.
Another one. What if Jimmy is part of the villains? Okay, hear me out.
Okay.
So he does magic, like hand magic card tricks, which is like, this is elite, this is a stretch, but card magic. And there was a couple of moments where he seemed far more like trying to get Monica away from the sword base. Like he was fully kind of resigned to getting away, compared to Darcy and Monica. So I think he's trying, if he is, he could be trying to herd Monica away because she's the one that obviously knows the most other than Hayward. There's another one. There's a lot of animals that are very odd and uncontrollable and like come in inopportune moments and stuff like that throughout the show. And they have a similar purpose to the character Pietro. So what if Pietro is the same bunny and stork and dog? It's the same thing. It's the same person, like influencing her life subtly. And then he comes as Pietro.
He is very similar in chaotic contribution to the stork.
What if the show is a show within a show within a show? So what if the entire investigation is also the trauma, like she is envisioning this? Because I will say, after episode 2, my first thought was actually this was like a dream kind of thing. Like I pictured Wanda laying on a metal table, like this going on in her head. What if that's actually what's happening and we're watching a show within a show within a show? Another theory, sorry, Cammien, another theory is this is actually an alternate timeline. So I did some research about what happens at the end of Endgame. This is the alternate timeline where from when Cap stays in the past or whatever. And so Wanda has to get her powers in a different way because of like the staff and stuff like that. Like I was trying to think about like how, like where these different things would be. And because of that, there's an evil Wanda and a good Wanda throughout the multiverse. And that's why she's going to be in the Doctor Strange movie. So the good version of Wanda and Doctor Strange go up against the evil version of Wanda. I don't know which one we're watching, but that'd be fun. Also, I think there's another theory that I have that kind of goes back to the Wanda laying on the metal table, that this isn't actually magic based, it's electronic based. Like I previously said, the framework, but like there's actual hints now. So when Vision goes to the edge of the hex, a very metal man, a vibranium man, walks up to the screen, and it has this like deflection, like magnetic deflection, much like if you put a magnet to a vacuum tube TV, it had the same effect. So what if it's not magic, it's electronic? Okay, I'm done. That was it.
I'm in pain. It's fine. I'm just gonna go let my brain melt out of my ears as the makeup washes off my face and I disintegrate like the Wicked Witch of the West. Carrie says, I don't
Agnes.
even want to think about making Jimmy a villain. The life size cutout of Gina Torres behind me likewise does not want to think about this, but I I I will just sit here in pain. And we can talk about the same time, same place next week with another episode of WandaVision that you can use as a digital tool to physically stab me in the heart. Sounds great. All right. Well, we will talk to you all later. Thank you for that crack theories with Kate corner. Um, we can workshop the name on that. And I'll talk to you guys later.